I don't want to take care of my partner's friend for the next 30 years. Look, my wife and I have been together for a few years, and her best friend is disabled. She can't walk or move much. Her family, who supposedly takes care of her, is leaving the house in a disgusting state. We're talking about hoarding and filth. I'm in a government career, and over the next decade I'll have to move about 3 to 5 times, sometimes even out of the country. My wife is studying, and hopefully she'll get a job in the medical field. We had already discussed that she wanted her best friend to move in with us, because her house is awful, and she's seen how patients are treated and abused in nursing homes, and she doesn't want her friend to end up there. Today we talked seriously, and I told her I'd only agree if we built a small house, like an extension of our home. But under the same roof, I don't feel comfortable sharing my private space with someone who's not family, not even with my own parents and siblings, unless it's in a bigger house. Financially, my job is enough for the two of us, but I'm not sure it would be enough for more. My wife didn't like that this is my only option, and she argued that since we're going to move often, we can't have an extension in every house. When I told her what if we get sent to a place where only government employees and their partners can live, she said she could rent a place for her and her BSF. And when I asked what happens if her BSF gets bored doing nothing, she said that when she finishes work, she can go spend time with her friend. Mind you, we hardly see each other because of my job and her school. This makes me feel like she's prioritizing her relationship with her BSF over our relationship. In the end, she got upset because I wasn't more open to the idea and was willing to let her BSF keep living in that house. Since that conversation, we've been somewhat distant. It's not like we're fighting all the time, but there's a tense atmosphere at home. Sometimes she tries to act like nothing happened, asking trivial questions about dinner or commenting on things from her day. But there are moments when she just goes quiet, checking her phone or staring at a spot without saying a word. I also feel trapped between wanting to give in and knowing that if I do, I'll carry a permanent discomfort. I've tried to explain to her that it's not about her friend per se, but what that living situation would represent for me. The loss of a space that I now feel is the only refuge of peace I have with so much movement in my career. But every time I try, she interprets it as a direct rejection of her friend, as if I didn't want her around or didn't care about her well-being. A few days ago, she got a call from her friend's sister. She said the situation at the house was getting worse. Rats, bugs, expired food, and the friend had been sick recently without anyone noticing until it was too obvious. That call left her devastated. I saw her cry silently for several minutes, holding her phone tightly. I wanted to comfort her, but as soon as I hugged her, she told me in a low tone, "This is what I don't want to happen." I felt like, somehow, she was blaming me for not having given in earlier. Even though she didn't say it directly, her look said more than any word. That night we didn't talk much. We each went to bed on our side, turning our backs to each other. Today, when I came back from work, I found her looking for accessible apartments for disabled people in the city. She was taking notes, making calls, asking about ramps, elevators, support services. I thought it was admirable that she was so committed, but it also alarmed me to think she might be willing to live separately from me to take care of her friend. I asked her if she was really considering moving alone with her. She looked at me for a moment in silence, then said, "I'm just looking at options. I don't want to leave her there, and I don't want to fight with you." And even though she said it calmly, I felt that a decision was forming inside her, one that excluded me. I don't know what to do. I don't want to be the obstacle in the life of someone who clearly has a huge heart. But I also don't want to completely sacrifice my emotional and mental comfort. I feel like we're both walking a tightrope, trying not to fall, but moving in opposite directions. I'm afraid that one day we'll just wake up in different houses, different lives, because neither of us wanted to give in, but we also didn't know how to find a middle ground. The following days passed in a kind of tense pause. We didn't argue, but we didn't talk about what really mattered either. We limited ourselves to automatic routines, preparing breakfast, leaving, coming back late, exchanging just a few words. It was as if we were both waiting for the other to make a definitive move, but neither dared to take that step. One afternoon, coming home earlier than usual, I found my wife on a video call with her friend. The screen showed a blurry image, but I could hear the girl's trembling voice. She wasn't crying, but she spoke with an almost resigned calmness, like someone who no longer expects things to get better. My wife was taking notes in a notebook, asking things about her health, medications, and how she'd been feeling in recent days. When she saw me, she didn't hang up the call. She just said, "He's here, I'll let you know later." And she stayed there, sitting at the dining table, as if I wasn't there. That night, at last, I decided to talk. I told her we needed to revisit the topic, not from the position of I give in or you give in, but to try to build something viable for both of us. I asked her if she had considered alternatives, like a specialized center where her friend could receive care without being in a nursing home. She looked at me and replied that she had already looked, but they were all impersonally cold, almost like prisons. She showed me photos, reviews, complaints from relatives, reports of negligence. Her research had been thorough. I understood it wasn't a fleeting idea or an impulsive act, but a decision that had been forming for a while. I had also been researching. I wanted to find a way to show her that I cared about her friend, but without losing my personal space. I had found some prefabricated temporary housing units, small modular homes that could be transported by truck. They were expensive, but they could be moved from city to city without being dismantled. When I showed her the project, at first she seemed interested, but when she saw the price, she said in a low voice, "It's not realistic." Then she sighed and put away her phone. Weekends became strange. She spent more time out, visiting her friend, bringing her food, cleaning what she could. I stayed home, reviewing work papers, or just sitting on the couch with the TV on, not watching anything. Sometimes I waited up for her, sometimes I pretended to be asleep. But I always noticed her mood dimmed more with each return. One Saturday morning, while she was getting ready to go out again, I asked her if she had thought about what all of this was doing to our relationship. She paused in front of the mirror with the brush in her hand and replied without turning around, "I know this is affecting us, but I can't look the other way knowing what she's going through." That sentence kept bouncing around in my mind the rest of the day. It made me think about the limits of empathy, about when helping someone starts to mean leaving someone else behind. That same week, I received a temporary transfer offer. It was a pilot project abroad, 6 months in a remote region, with the possibility of extension. The position came with housing and benefits. When I told her, she didn't respond at first. Then, without looking directly at me, she said, "And what do I do here with her?" I told her it wasn't decided, that I could turn it down, but that I wanted us to talk about it. She told me she had been thinking about renting a small apartment near her friend, at least until the situation improved. She asked me if I would mind, and even though I felt a slight sting inside, I told her that if that's what she wanted to do, I wouldn't stand in her way. Since then, we've begun living in a space where logistics have replaced affection. We talk to coordinate schedules, calendars, tasks. But the heart of our conversations seems to have gone. Sometimes I feel like I'm sharing an apartment with a very dedicated colleague, not with my wife. There are no spontaneous gestures, no shared laughter, no plans for the future. There's a pause that keeps stretching. One night, while I was washing the dishes, she came into the kitchen silently. She hugged me from behind, without saying a word. It was an unexpected gesture, almost forgotten. I stood still, feeling her breathing. Then she whispered to me, "I'm scared too." I didn't respond, but I turned off the water and held her hand. I didn't know if that gesture was an attempt to return or an early goodbye, but it was the first moment in days where we both felt present. The situation is still unresolved. She continues looking for places, talking to social workers, checking budgets. I keep thinking about the transfer, without signing anything. It's as if we're both postponing inevitable decisions. But in that delay, there's also a quiet hope. Maybe, without realizing it, we're trying to find each other again in the middle of the distance that's formed between us. Weeks passed, and although nothing was fully resolved, our decisions began to materialize. She, true to her commitment, found a small accessible apartment 10 minutes from where her friend lived. A modest building, with an elevator and a quiet community. Although we didn't officially move, she started spending more time there. She bought simple furniture, adapted the bathroom, even hired someone who could assist her friend during the hours she'd be away studying. She explained it to me as something provisional, but the way she talked about the place hinted that she felt it was a different home, separate from ours. Meanwhile, I agreed to take part in the selection process for the project abroad, without fully committing. There were meetings, psychological tests, virtual interviews, competency exams. I threw myself into it, not so much for the position, but to feel like I was moving forward in something. At home, the atmosphere became functional, as if we were managing an office-style cohabitation. There was respect, a certain degree of care, but no intimacy. We looked after each other. Yes, but from a distance. One night, returning from a visit to her new residence, she brought me food. A gesture that, in another context, would have moved me, but now felt almost like a courtesy. While we ate, I asked her if she planned to stay there indefinitely. She looked me in the eye for the first time in days and said, "I don't know, it depends on many things." Then she asked if I was planning to leave. I told her I wasn't sure what I wanted. It was the first time we admitted our mutual confusion without fighting. Amidst all that, we received unexpected news. Her friend had been hospitalized. A poorly treated infection, worsened by the lack of hygiene in her old house. Although her condition was improving, the experience left a mark on my wife. I saw her transform into someone more determined, more direct. In a conversation with the doctors, she demanded that they discharge her only if they ensured that the conditions of her new home were appropriate. She even spoke with a lawyer about guardianship and legal protection. I saw in her a firmness that had only shown briefly before. Even though I tried to stay out of it, I began to get more involved. I accompanied her to the hospital a couple of times, helped carry boxes to the new apartment, assembled an ergonomic chair for her friend, even made a few calls to healthcare providers. Not because I had completely changed my mind, but because I needed to fully understand what she saw. I wanted to find common ground, something that would allow us to move forward without one of us feeling betrayed by the other. One night, sitting on the balcony of the temporary apartment, with the distant noise of traffic in the background, she told me something she had never mentioned before, that when they were teenagers, her friend had tried to take her own life. No one knew at the time, because it was a hidden attempt, disguised as an accident. But my wife found out years later, and since then she felt she couldn't leave her alone, that the responsibility had become part of her life. That night I didn't say anything. I just listened. I understood a lot. I began to see all the effort she was making with new eyes, not just for her friend, but for that younger version of herself who had felt powerless. For her, protecting her was also protecting that part of herself. It didn't justify everything, but it explained it better. In parallel, work kept moving forward. I was shortlisted for the international assignment. They offered flexible conditions, with the possibility of temporary visits home. But I didn't know if that still counted as home. My things were still in the original apartment, but I spent more and more time alone there. The silence was heavy. I wondered if she felt the same in her new space, or if she experienced it as a relief. During one of our brief encounters, she mentioned she had been thinking about legally arranging her friend's care, that if something happened to her, she wanted to make sure her friend wouldn't return to that neglectful environment. She asked if I would be willing to be part of the process as a backup. It was a complicated question, not just because of the commitment it implied, but because it meant formalizing a bond one was still trying to accept. I told her I needed time to think about it. She nodded, without pressuring me. In the midst of all that, one night I found myself writing. Without knowing why, I started drafting a letter. It wasn't for her, nor for her friend, but for myself. A way to put in order the emotions that had accumulated without space or voice. I talked about my fear of losing her, about my need to feel we had a project together, and about the pain of seeing that project seemingly fade. I didn't show her the letter, but it helped me see that I still cared about all of this. That despite the wear and tear, I didn't want to give up. Now everything is on hold. She goes back and forth between both spaces. I'm still evaluating whether to accept the transfer offer. Neither of us has made a definitive decision. It's as if the days have turned into an emotional waiting room, where every gesture, every word, could mean either a step closer or an unspoken goodbye. There's no certainty, but there's no abandonment either. Just that long, tense wait, where more is felt in what's not said than in what is openly expressed. That winter was different. The weeks grew shorter with the coldness of decisions we could no longer avoid. My transfer was finally confirmed. I would go abroad for a year, with the possibility of extending the contract depending on results. I was given a month to get everything ready. At the same time, my wife had formalized partial guardianship of her friend, and although she didn't say it in those words, I knew she wouldn't be coming back fully to our apartment. We had lived a sort of rehearsal for separation during those months, not due to lack of love, but because of convictions we never managed to reconcile. And although we had promised each other, we couldn't build a common ground where both loyalties had space without canceling each other out. We had talked endlessly, rehearsed possible arrangements, considered middle ground options. But at some point, it became clear that each of us was defending a cause vital to their identity. Neither wanted the other to yield out of obligation, and neither wanted to give up out of resignation. The day I picked up my last suitcase, she was in the hallway, arms crossed and gaze steady. There were no tears. We knew each other well enough to know that pitiful words weren't necessary. She hugged me long and tight, like someone who knows that moment is about to become a memory. She whispered in my ear, "I'm not leaving you, but I can't go with you either." I replied with a lump in my throat, "I'm not leaving you either, but I can't stay anymore." It was our silent farewell pact. The airport was impersonal, as those places tend to be, places that belong to no one. As the plane took off, I looked out the window with the certainty that something very valuable was being left behind. Not just her, but a version of myself that would never be the same again. A new chapter was beginning, full of demands, where I would have to reinvent myself without the daily echo of her laughter or the warmth of her eyes tired from long study shifts. The first months abroad were strange. I immersed myself in work with surgical discipline. I met objectives, attended meetings, made contacts. But inside, there was a kind of orderly emptiness, like a clean house with no furniture. I kept in touch with her from time to time. Brief, neutral messages. She told me how her friend's health was doing, how they were adjusting to the routine, whether they had gotten a new chair yet or if the elevator was still breaking down. I replied with logistical updates, schedules, weather, news from the country. We never stopped talking, but it wasn't the same anymore. One day, I received an unexpected envelope at the address of the complex where I lived. It was from her. Inside was a letter, handwritten, with neat but trembling handwriting. She told me she had found a bit of peace, that her friend was starting to gain weight, that she no longer woke up startled. She said she finally felt like she was doing something right. But she also confessed that she dreamed about our evenings of pizza and bad movies, our spontaneous walks to the store, our arguments about documentaries. "Sometimes I find myself talking to you in a low voice while I cook," she wrote. "It's not empty nostalgia. It's gratitude for having loved with you." I responded a few days later, not with another letter, but with a call. We talked over video for almost an hour, without dodging the important things. I told her I didn't regret anything, but that it still hurt. She nodded silently. She told me she no longer expected us to get back together, but that she would always consider that time as one of the most meaningful of her life. It was a sweet conversation, without knots, as if we had finally found the right tone to say goodbye with dignity. As the months went by, our lives continued branching out. I started seeing someone from the work team, a calm relationship, without the emotional urgency of the past. She focused on finishing her degree, landed an internship at a rehabilitation center, and little by little her circle expanded. Her friend improved slowly but steadily. We never touched each other again, but we congratulated each other on birthdays, achievements, important changes. A year later, I received another letter. This time it was a postcard with a photo of a huge sunflower and a phrase that said, "What is cared for blooms, even if not always in the same place." There was no signature, but her handwriting was unmistakable. I stuck it on the fridge next to a magnet she had given me on a previous trip. Every time I looked at it, I felt a strange mix of sadness and gratitude. Because although we didn't end up together, we said goodbye in the best way we knew how. Sometimes love is not enough to sustain a shared life, but that doesn't make it any less valuable. There are loves that aren't meant to stay, but to teach. And ours taught me to choose without guilt, to love without chains, and to let go when staying would mean betraying yourself. There is no resentment, only the certainty that even though our paths diverged, we both kept walking with our heads held high and our hearts whole.